Welcome to AI Horror Stories. Prepare to be chilled. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell for daily doses of AI-generated fright. First story is Haunted Hotel Room Number 310. This is the true story of a haunted hotel room in Oregon. The hotel owners have tried to hush up the story for fear that no one will visit their establishment, but the name of it is the Oregon Caves Chateau. A woman was driving back to her home in California from Washington to California. It was late evening and snow had begun to fall before she finally reached the little Oregon town where she planned to spend the night. Tired and ready for a hot meal and a good night's sleep, she stopped at the first place she came upon. It was an old hotel on the main street. The lobby had a musty odor. The clerk behind the desk signed her in. Her room was on the third floor, room 310. An elderly bellhop helped her with her luggage. As soon as the door was opened, a blast of hot air struck the woman full in the face. With the hot air came something else, something she could not define, but that filled her with dread. It was heavy and depressing, she explained, with the strong scent of evil. She felt as if she was about to faint. All she said was, "It's awfully hot." The bellhop tinkered with the radiator knobs. Then he opened the window and left. The room began to cool off, but the feeling of despair and dread grew stronger. It centered on the open square of black window space. The terror seemed to speak in her mind. She thought she could sense a voice whispering to her, compelling her to do something terrible. "Go to the window," it said. "Throw yourself out." She couldn't seem to resist the urge to jump out the window to what she knew would be certain death. She clawed at the bedsheets, trying to restrain herself from walking towards the open window. Terrified, the woman eventually summoned the strength and crawled out of the room. She rushed down to the lobby and shouted to the staff that she couldn't stay another minute. She explained, "I was sure that if I stayed the night, I'd be dead by morning." She was prepared to sacrifice the money she'd already paid just to leave, but when she went, the clerk never asked what was wrong or if she wished to try another room. He returned the full cash amount to her. She checked into another hotel and had planned to be on her way early the next morning. Instead, she decided to stay over a day and look into the history of the old hotel to see if she could discover the reason for her terrifying experience there. She visited the local library to make a few inquiries. An elderly librarian sat behind the desk. "I'm just wondering," the woman said tentatively. "Did anything shocking ever happen in the old hotel?" The librarian looked at her strangely. "How did you come upon that bit of history?" she asked. It took the hotel a long time to squash the story. The librarian went on to tell what had happened. One evening back in 1948, a couple checked into the hotel as Mr. and Mrs. Oscar Smith. The next morning, hotel employees found the young woman's body lying on the sidewalk outside the hotel beneath room 310. The man who had registered as her husband had disappeared. At first it was ruled a suicide, the librarian concluded. But then they pried open her fist and found a handful of dark curly hair, not her own. So they made a search for the murderer. But he was never found. By the way, the librarian suddenly added, "Isn't that a coincidence? It all happened on November 5th, 40 years ago yesterday." Second story is Demon of Detroit. The Demon of Detroit is a true scary story about the Cole Adams house in Detroit, Michigan, which was said to be haunted by a horrible thing of unspeakable terror. It all started in the early 1960s, when Mr. and Mrs. Adams moved into the house in Detroit, Michigan. They had 5 small children and a pet dog. Almost as soon as they moved in, the family seemed to sense that there was something wrong with the back bedroom. All of the children avoided it and even the dog refused to go inside. It was a tiny room with just enough space for a bed and a built-in closet in the corner. Mr. Adams worked the night shift at the Cadillac assembly plant, so when he came home in the morning, he would sleep in the back bedroom. It was far enough away from the rest of the house that he thought no one would disturb him. However, sleeping in the bedroom always gave him a strange and uneasy feeling. Almost immediately, he began to experience horrible nightmares. They were so vivid and real that he would wake up screaming and shaking with fear. In one of the ghastly nightmares, he dreamed that he opened the closet door and the blood-soaked and mutilated body of a woman fell out. As the days went by, the dreams became worse and worse. He lost so much sleep and he was so exhausted that he ended up moving back to the master bedroom with his wife. The nightmares suddenly stopped. When his mother came to visit the family, they let her sleep in the back bedroom. The next morning, she said she didn't get a wink of sleep. Her face was pale and her whole body was shaking. She claimed she had heard terrible sounds in the room that went on all night long, as if someone was trying to break in. She refused to sleep in the bedroom again and decided to cut her stay short and go home. After that, Mr. and Mrs. Adams began to realize that something dark and loathsome was lurking in the back bedroom. Then, an old friend of the family came to town and they gave him the room for the night. They didn't mention a thing to him about their own unpleasant experiences in the room. Shortly after midnight, the man was lying in bed when he was awakened by the feeling of someone turning him over. He opened his eyes and saw someone standing outside the bedroom door. It was a woman with long hair, but she had her back to him. She was wearing a short fur coat and a blue dress. He got up and started walking towards her, but all of a sudden, every light in the house went off. He was stumbling around in the darkness and when the lights came back on again, he found himself in the kitchen. Mrs. Adams was there, washing her hair in the kitchen sink. All of a sudden, they heard a terrible, unearthly wailing sound that left both of them speechless with fright and a sickening smell filled the room. Then, the heavy trap door in the kitchen floor that led to the dirt basement started opening and slamming back down. Terrified, they called the police. Within minutes, a few officers were searching the house from top to bottom, but they didn't find anything. The next morning, when Mr. Adams got home from the plant, his wife and friend were waiting for him. As calmly as they could, they told him what they had experienced during the night. He didn't believe them. That evening, he decided to sleep in the back bedroom. He was just about to drift off when he heard someone moving in the room. He thought it was his wife, but when he called her name, there was no answer. He turned over to look and saw a hideous face, just inches from him. It was the most horrible thing he had ever seen. The eyes stared past him and the mouth moved to talk, but all that came out was a hissing sound and a terrible stench. Mr. Adams came running out of the back bedroom, his eyes wide and screaming with terror. He was ripping handfuls of hair from his head, as he ran. His friend tried to grab him and hold him down, but Mr. Adams went berserk, kicking and fighting. Finally his wife and his friend managed to throw a blanket over him and wrestle him to the floor. The house was filled with the same nauseating stench they had smelled the night before. An hour later, he had calmed down enough to tell his family about the ghastly and indescribable face he had seen. The husband and wife grabbed their sleeping children from their beds and fled into the night. The next morning, they all moved in with Mrs. Adams' parents in a different part of Detroit. The Adams family had to admit defeat and they left the house and the back bedroom to the horrific entity that was lurking in it. The Demon of Detroit. Third story is La Pascualita. In Chihuahua, Mexico for over 80 years there was a mannequin known as La Pascualita, that may have been the embalmed daughter of the store's original owner. In 1930 Chihuahua, Mexico, Pascuala Esparza Perales de Perez owned a small but fairly successful clothing store named La Popular that specialized in wedding dresses. She would often spend most of her days working at the store, ensuring everything was in perfect condition while greeting customers with a huge smile. According to locals, the only thing Pascuala loved more than her business was her daughter. So it was no surprise that the store would close for a day as Pascuala took the day off for her daughter's wedding. But a few days later, the store was still closed. People began to get curious and started to worry about the usually happy and inviting Pascuala. Their curiosity turned to sorrow when they found out Pascuala's daughter had died moments before her wedding. Her daughter had been stung by a scorpion taking refuge in her wedding dress and she collapsed on her way to the altar. Pasquala was devastated and many believed her store would never open back up. A few weeks later on March 25, 1930, the doors of El Popular opened and many flocked to the store to visit their heartbroken friend. To their shock, they were met with a joyful and happy Pasquala who simply stated her daughter would always be by her side. Meanwhile, other locals were transfixed by the beauty of a new display in the window of the store. It was a brand new mannequin unlike any they had seen before, yet it looked familiar. Asking Pasquala where she got the lifelike doll, she told them it was custom made in Paris, France. Since March 25 was the Dia de la Encarnación, the Feast of the Incarnation, Pasquala named the mannequin La Chonita, as it's a nickname for Encarnación. But people were taken aback by just how lifelike La Chonita looked. She had extremely detailed wrinkles on her hands, varicose veins on her legs, teary eyes, lifelike skin, and real hair. It was then the locals realized La Chonita bore a striking resemblance to Pasquala's late daughter. As the days went on and more learned of the lifelike mannequin, the store experienced an influx of visitors specifically there to see the doll that resembled Pasquala's daughter. Soon they even gave La Chonita a new name, La Pascualita, Little Pasquala. Rumors started to spread that a doll that detailed would be impossible to make, and many questioned whether it was a doll to begin with. One night after the store had closed, a taxi driver taking a break near the store spotted someone moving around inside. Peering through the window, he saw a beautiful woman in a wedding dress dancing in the dark, barely illuminated by the moonlight, and fell in love. The following day he returned to the store wanting to ask Pasquala about the woman, but he froze in terror when he realized the woman he saw was La Pascualita. It wasn't long before other stories were passed around, many claiming to see La Pascualita move her eyes, fingers, and even smile. Special attention was placed on the mannequin's hand that appeared to be aging as time went on. People realized that they were right. La Pascualita wasn't a doll, she was the embalmed daughter of Pasquala now on display, and she would always be by her mother's side. Of course, Pasquala denied claims she had her daughter embalmed, but many pointed out that she always refused to show proof that La Pascualita was just a mannequin. Meanwhile, the stories showing otherwise continued to grow. One legend says that a couple arguing across the street from La Pascualita turned into a heated exchange, ending with the girlfriend ending the relationship. As she crossed the street, the enraged ex-boyfriend pulled out a gun and shot her before running away. The woman lay dying on the road and looked over to La Pascualita, begging her for help. She claims she saw La Pascualita looked at her and smile as she passed out. Later in the hospital, the doctors stated her survival was nothing short of a miracle, and the woman went on to credit La Pascualita for saving her life. Others claim that if you see La Pascualita smile at you, it meant you were going to have good luck for the foreseeable future. As the decades went on, La Pascualita became a staple of the community, and many noted the drying and receding skin on her hands as proof that she really was a body. La Pascualita became a tourist attraction, with many coming by to see her and hoping for a sign of good fortune. There are a few other versions of the origin of La Pascualita. Some have some minor changes, like saying that Pasquala didn't have a daughter and it was actually her sister who died, or that it was a black widow spider and not a scorpion. Others say Pasquala didn't get the mannequin from France but instead built it herself after hearing that her daughter's spirit was spotted roaming around the city. One big variation to the legend says after the La Pascualita was put on display, it really was just a mannequin, and people were attracted to the intricate detail. A slight variation says it was the daughter, but that no one claimed it was alive. One day a Frenchman passing by the store spotted La Pascualita and mistook her for a real person, but quickly realized she was a mannequin. But something kept calling him back to the store, and despite her being an inanimate object, he fell in love. The Frenchman happened to be a magician and used some forbidden spells to bring La Pascualita to life. Every night under a full moon, many claimed to see her and the Frenchman walking around town, having fun and dancing. The legend of La Pascualita appears to be nothing more than an effective marketing ploy to drive business to La Popular's clothing store. Today, La Popular is known as La Popular La Casa de Pascualita because the legend is a huge tourist attraction. For years if you went to the store, you could buy a pamphlet detailing the legend and hear about how getting a blessing from La Pascualita meant good luck for you and your marriage. With the various claims that La Pascualita is real and the numerous images and videos showing her move, there are just as many claims stating that the doll has been DNA tested, pulled apart, and revealed to be fake. Even if they don't actually believe in the legend, many who live in Chihuahua see the mannequin as part of their culture and a central part of their city. Despite this, in 2017, La Pascualita was gone for 9 months when the owner lent her out for an exhibition of antiques. Upon her return in 2018, many noticed the Pascualita that returned wasn't the same that left. Original on the left, new one on the right. There have been no answers to what happened to the original or why this new one was placed in its spot. An unverified claim on the Pascualita Instagram says that La Pascualita was also being restored at the exhibition and it was discovered she was a cadaver this whole time, so a replica was made. Again, this is an unverified source written on what appears to be a Word document. No actual newspapers or other records have claimed this is true. This has left many questioning what happened to La Pascualita and demanding her return. Others believe the soul of the original was somehow transferred to the new mannequin or that the original was laid to rest after being on display for 88 years.